Managing student behavior is a challenge, regardless of the setting, but managing scores of children while driving a 13-ton vehicle presents a challenge not everyone can handle successfully. On top of that, there's a rising concern about school violence and the safety of our students and employees. There is hope and movement to turn around the staggering rise of youth violence. As educators, we refuse to feel hopeless, and it's not in our collective or personal nature to feel hopeless. As we learn more strategies in student discipline, we take yet another step in the process to detect and prevent school violence. On February 11, 1988, while working at a Florida high school as an assistant principal, Dr. Nancy Blackwelder, a fellow administrator and a teacher, fell victim to 2 gun-wielding students, which rocked the educational community. After her recovery, she recognized the need to evaluate school districts' training programs and use the knowledge gained through her experience to help other educators. Dr. Blackwelder is an articulate speaker with experience as a teacher and as an assistant principal at both the elementary and high school levels, an assistant director of transportation, and an administrator in the special needs student education department. Tomorrow, we hope that you'll return to your jobs and use the strategies you learned today and feel that powerful sense of assurance that comes when you know you have the tools in place to ensure that your buses and schools are safe and happy havens for everyone.
Hi, I'm Nancy Blackwelder, and as a former teacher and assistant principal at both the elementary and the high school levels, and as a director of transportation in a very large school district of over 100,000 students, 140 some odd schools, over 600 school bus routes, I realized that when I came from the instructional side of the house to the supported services side of the house, that the vast majority of training that we did for school bus drivers was how to drive the truck. And we gave them precious little, if any, information on how to deal with children. Now, it's no surprise to you that dealing with children is half the battle. So I have developed some instructional training for bus drivers because I just don't think it's fair to send somebody out on the street with a bunch of kids without giving them the tools they need to be successful in that environment. It's like handing them the torch of education flame first. So this instructional series that I'm going to produce is all about how drivers get into trouble. We want to get that bus environment to such a state that our drivers have the best chance of staying out of trouble. This is what will be covered in Program 6. Student attacks on drivers, surviving hostage situations, and distracted driving. It is unfortunate that this type of problem has to be addressed, but because it is a problem that has escalated in past years, it is important that we do. 6 different scenarios straight from the headlines provides discussion on what happened and ideas about how it could have been prevented. There is also discussion about actions that can escalate major misbehavior and how to avoid major confrontations. Here's our first headline. A Pinellas County school bus driver was attacked on her bus by a 17-year-old student after a dispute over a cell phone. The student, Dorian Williams, repeatedly slammed the driver's head against the bus dashboard and the steering wheel, then ripped the microphone out when she tried to call the school district for help. So what happened? One of the students gave her a cell phone that had been found on the bus. The last student in line was Williams. He told the driver it was his phone and demanded it back. The driver told the student she had to make sure it was his phone. She told him he could get it from the school the next morning if he could prove that it belonged to him. So could this have been prevented? Was it reasonable that the driver expected the student to be able to definitively identify the phone as his? Was there any other way to determine its ownership? At the point he insisted she give it to him, was it worth it to insist she would not? Or was there an alternative? Well, it was totally reasonable that the driver expect the student to be able to definitively identify the phone as his, and turning it into the school for the school to handle is one way to deal with the situation. Once a student's behavior escalated, however, alternative means of identification may have been used. In other words, ask him his phone number and look at the contact list for his name card, or ask his number and have another student call that number to see if it rings. But before it escalates into a beating, you could note particulars about the phone, relinquish the phone to the student, and report it to the school for them to investigate the next day. Here's our second headline: Special needs student attacks school bus driver while the bus is in motion. In this situation, it was an unfortunate incident where a student suddenly leaped from his seat and went towards the driver and grabbed her scarf. This is a student with special needs who has not had any history of any sort of violent behavior. Luckily, the driver remained calm and kept the bus on the road. 2 fifth grade boys saw what was happening and quickly got the student off the driver. Could it have been prevented? Sometimes bizarre things happen. We cannot predict every action that may occur. But especially with special needs students, however, it is of value to involve the school with discussion of expected behaviors, triggers, and agreed upon actions for discipline. How about this headline? School bus driver Danny Campbell suffered a broken leg and facial injuries when the 2 cousins pulled him off the bus and assaulted him at the Blackman High School. Campbell testified that the cousins got on his bus at Blackman High School and one boy pulled off his belt. Campbell stopped the bus and ordered the boy to put on his belt. The boy cussed him and he proceeded to order them off the bus. School district launched an investigation after reports surfaced that the bus driver, who was beaten by 2 teens, had taunted the teens before the attack. Could it have been prevented? Was it necessary to stop the bus and confront the student about his belt? Was it a safety hazard? What did he gain from taunting the students? Should he have ordered them off the bus? We don't know why the student took off his belt, but unless it's being used as a weapon, it doesn't seem like a reason to pull the bus over. Confronting or taunting a student in front of his or her peers is a recipe for disaster. Give directions, voice consequences, and delay the disciplinary process if it's not a safety issue until you can speak one-on-one with the student. In this district, although there is a district policy that prohibits drivers from ordering students off the bus, there is a less well-published district crisis plan that allows the practice in certain situations. Here are the headlines. Kalamazoo bipolar student snaps and beats bus driver apparently upset with how the substitute driver was performing her duties.
That bus driver took a beating she continues to recover from tonight. This happened yesterday morning around 7:30 near the corner of Gull Road and Brook Drive in Kalamazoo Township. Police say a 16-year-old K-Risa student repeatedly punched that driver in the face and the head. And you're about to see this attack, and we have to warn you, we've blurred the faces, but you do see the attack, and that first punch is quite a doozy. The student fires off some serious rage there, and we've learned this is not the first time for this guy.
It's brutal, vicious, and unforgiving. A defenseless bus driver beaten relentlessly by a student wielding a large wooden brush in his left hand. 2 students try to help the bus driver, but it does little good. We met with the victim today. Though she wouldn't go on camera for fear of further attacks, this beating left her with a broken hand. Burst blood vessels in both eyes, cuts and contusions over her head and face, 6 stitches in her lip, and a cheek swollen to the size of a softball. The attacker's parents asked us not to be revealed either, but told us today their son isn't responsible.
So what happened? The suspect told his father that he was provoked. The bus driver had hit the brakes real hard, and he said he fell and hit his shoulder on the seat. Video of the incident shows where the suspect loses his balance after the bus driver taps the brakes, but he never falls or hits anything. The video shows the suspect calmly taking off his jacket before walking back to the bus driver and beginning to beat her. Could it have been prevented? Is it a valid maneuver to tap the brakes to warn students they should be seated while the bus is in motion? Could it have been that the boy would have behaved that way regardless of the driver's skill to de-escalate the situation? We don't have enough information to know why the driver tapped the brakes. It could have been traffic, or could have been because the student was standing prior to the bus coming to a stop, and to warn the boy of his need to stay seated, she tapped the brakes. Here's another headline. Portsmouth school bus driver recounts attack on her.
Portsmouth middle schooler is in the Tidewater Detention Center tonight, accused of punching his school bus driver. Renee Mulder told us the 14-year-old boy knocked her teeth out and fractured her jaw after getting upset while riding the bus. The boy has been suspended from school. 13 News reporter Brian Farrell talked to Mulder about the alleged assault. Brian?
David, she had surgery to get her teeth back into place and is hopeful she'll be able to keep them without having any kind of replacement done. Mulder said several students were unruly, explaining one student went far beyond that point, becoming violent.
One particular student, as he was going off the bus, looked at me and said, "You white b***, you made me hit my face. I'm going to F yours up." The eye was swollen.
With puffed eye and tender mouth, Renee Mulder says she thought students led the middle schooler off the bus she drove Thursday, taking his threats with him. She was wrong.
I remember looking up into my mirror to see how many more students were on the bus, and then the next thing that I remember, I put my hand on my face, and my hand was covered with blood, and my teeth were knocked back into the roof of my mouth.
Mulder, a supervisor within Portsmouth Public Schools, was substituting on the afternoon run from Craddock Middle School. Throughout the ride, she explains a number of students got mouthy. The third stop, where that particular student Mulder described supposedly hit his face, prompting him to go after her.
They were cursing at me, standing up. I was kind of rolled through the stop a little bit, and when I stopped, the students that were standing kind of stumbled forward. By no means did I think that he was actually going to hit me.
Could it have been prevented? Should students be approaching the front of the bus as the driver approaches the bus stop? Was she really tapping the brakes to make a point that they shouldn't be standing while the bus is moving? She was subbing for another driver. Had the regular driver enforced the rule that students had to be seated until the bus came to a stop, it may not have ever been an issue for the sub. She likely was unfamiliar with the route, therefore didn't tap the brakes intentionally. However, you can see how the practice of intentionally tapping the brakes is unsafe and can escalate into something worse. Here's another headline. Student allegedly attacks bus driver in Dixon County.
Courtney, more school news now over in Dixon County. Officials there say that a student attacked a bus driver. Officials say that the New Directions Academy senior was fighting apparently with his younger sister as they were on their bus on their way to school Thursday morning. So the bus driver decided that's not very safe. He tried to intervene, and that's when officials claimed the student turned and attacked the driver. The driver is pressing charges now against the kid. This morning, school officials won't confirm if that student is still in school.
So what happened? Officials said a New Directions Academy senior was fighting with his younger sister on the way to school last Thursday when the bus driver intervened. That's when officials said the student attacked the driver. Could it have been prevented? When the driver intervened in the fight, was it necessary to get physically involved? Was there another way to handle it? Domestic disputes are risky for those who intervene. There is a high likelihood that when you intervene on behalf of a victim, the victim will end up turning on you. Keep that in mind as you approach this kind of situation. So now we're going to talk about 12 actions that could escalate major misbehavior. Top of the list, using physical force. When you're dealing with any situation that's anything other than happy, 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 keep your hands off. Making unsubstantiated accusations. We can only really accuse kids of what we see. Accuse them of something else and they will argue that you don't know what you're talking about. Yelling. Acting superior. Giving commands and demands as opposed to options. Mimicking the student, making fun. Using sarcasms and put-downs. Using tense body language such as crossed arms and clenched fists. Backing the student into a corner with no way out. Moralizing and preaching. Making comparisons with others. And having a double standard. Do what I say, not as I do. So how do we prevent major confrontations? Well, you need to control your own emotion. Focus on the misbehavior, not the student. It's not the student that's bad, it's behavior that is unacceptable. Diffuse or delay, if possible, until you don't have an audience. Model appropriate behavior. Schools are high-profile targets for those who are seeking their 15 minutes of fame. In a hostage situation, what should you do? This unit discusses active listening skills such as effective pauses, minimal encouragement, paraphrasing, emotional labeling, mirroring, and open-ended questions. Survival tips are suggested along with identification tips and onboard procedures during a hostage situation. So let's see how much you know about how to deal with a hostage situation. True or false? Over 89% of all hostage-related situations result in no one getting hurt, including the hostage taker. That's true. If the students or the bus driver sense the right opportunity, they should try to overcome the hostage taker. That's false. True or false? School-related hostage situations are likely to increase nationally. That is true. The right school security plans can almost ensure prevention of a hostage-taking situation. That's false. Urban and larger school districts are more likely to experience a hostage situation. That is false. The primary goal of a hostage negotiator or SWAT team is to take out the hostage taker at the right opportunity. That's false. Here's our first headline. Driver stops student from hijacking bus. This driver said he had no training in how to handle such a situation. The driver told him to calm down and began asking the boy various questions. Police said the boy told him he planned to have the driver take him to Washington, D.C., where he wanted to shoot government officials. So here's another bus hostage situation that occurred in the Miami-Dade School District. There's our school bus driver. She was driving 9 special needs students when she came to a bus stop and the bad guy forced himself onto the school bus as the children got on. Now you look at that, and that's got to be a bad day for a bus driver with that kind of force behind you as you drive the bus. I'm thinking it might be a good time to be robbing a bank somewhere else in Miami. They drove around for such a long time that they decided to set up a roadblock and get the bus to stop so that they could get a SWAT team member in position to shoot the hostage taker. At this point, he's telling this driver that she should drive through the roadblock. So what does she do? She drives through the roadblock. Bless her heart, she's trying not to get the bus scratched at the same time. Now you see the SWAT team attacks the bus. They're breaking out windows, they're entering the bus. They've already shot the man. They're going to pull him out and put him on the street and cuff him to end the siege. So what are some survival tips? Well, number one, try not to panic. Remain calm and under control, and help to keep the students calm. Avoid quick movements that may be mistaken for aggressive action. Follow the instructions of the hostage taker and inform the students to do so as well. Do not try to be a hero or heroine by attacking or trying to disarm the attacker. The same is true for your students. Don't bargain or try to negotiate with a hostage taker. This is the responsibility of trained professionals. Make certain you keep an up-to-date seating chart. Follow any instructions of law enforcement, like the hostage negotiator. Do not radio for assistance unless you are instructed to use the radio by the hostage taker. Have a known code word that is used for hostage situations in case you are permitted to relay a message to the person in charge of transportation. It could be that you would explain to them at some point the staff at the office are going to be calling and wondering where the kids are, and you could present that as a notion such that he would allow you to get on the phone or get on the horn and call dispatch. At that point, it'd be good to have a code word so they knew the situation you were facing. If the hostage taker allows any students off the bus, mentally note their names and where they got off is possible. And do not offer yourself as a hostage. Treat the hostage takers as normally as possible. Ask permission to speak. Face him or her when speaking. Don't crowd his or her space. Be respectful. Don't argue and don't make suggestions. Don't get physical. Try not to stare. Might make them uncomfortable. Listen calmly. Don't interrupt. Do not make promises you can't honor. Try not to be argumentative. Do not try to escape, leaving the children behind. Show empathy. It is looking at the situation from the hostage taker's point of view. Humanize yourself and the children with eye contact if he allows it, he or she. The captor thinks he or she has a legitimate problem. Don't minimalize it. Okay, there's something called active listening skills that may help you in a hostage-taking situation. The first skill is called an effective pause. People are generally a little uncomfortable in a conversation when there is space where nothing is being said. If you pause, then that may encourage the captor to talk more. The more the captor talks, the better off you are. There's a skill called minimal encouragements, which is using simple phrases like I see or I understand or nodding your head that leads the person to believe that you are indeed interested in what they're saying. There's a skill called paraphrasing, where you rephrase the captor's words with words of your own. This also gives them the impression that you're listening. Emotional labeling. It's okay to state the obvious. You seem angry. You seem frustrated. Mirroring. Mirroring is echoing the captor's last few words of the sentence, not just rephrasing the entire sentence, but just echoing the last few words. And open-ended questions. Closed questions are questions that can be answered with one word. Open-ended questions make the captor speak in sentences. And don't use why questions. Why questions are perceived as judgmental. Keep with what questions or how questions or where questions that are trying to solicit facts about what's going on with the captor. So an open-ended question might be, what is it that happened? Can you help me understand what has upset you? What are you hoping for? And it's okay to use I messages to communicate your own feelings, that you're feeling scared or concerned or threatened. You need to think about identification, characteristics, physical characteristics, height, weight, age, hair, sex, scars, tattoos, race, type of clothing, things they're carrying, things that could be helpful to law enforcement. Need to look at the kind of weapons the person has. Are they handguns? Is it a rifle, a shotgun, an automatic, an explosive device, knives? And there are some onboard procedures that may help law enforcement. Turn on your emergency flashers if you can. When buses are driving around the street with emergency flashers on, it may bring attention to what's going on the bus. Turn on your interior and overhead lights if you can. That allows law enforcement to get a better look at what's going on inside the bus. If you can, instruct the kids to open the windows. That also gives law enforcement better access to the interior of the bus. If you're told to stop, try parking near a building or a group of trees so law enforcement can hide their approach. And if you have a two-way radio, keep the microphone keyed open if you can, such that people in dispatch can hear what's going on the bus. Distracted driving has always been a problem, but nowadays everyone has a cell phone, and the results of its use while driving has been devastating. Research on distracted driving reveals some surprising facts. Let's see how bus drivers get into trouble when they are distracted while driving. Here's our first headline: Bus driver rear-ends SUV while texting.
Now we want to move on to an alarming warning about texting while driving. You know it's dangerous. Many people still continue to do it, and now there's some frightening new video that proves how bad it can be. Here's NBC's Janet Shamlian.
On a busy Texas interstate, traffic up ahead is at a dead stop. You can see it, but the driver of this San Antonio City bus speeding down the road clearly had something else occupying his attention. Betty Jo Hummel was in the driver's seat of that SUV.
Here it comes. Oh my God, that's bad. It's horrible. It was the most horrific thing I've probably ever lived through.
With two disabled passengers strapped in behind him, why didn't the driver ever slow down? Take a look at what Adrian Perez was doing instead. He pulls out his cell phone and starts texting, and not just for a few seconds. For 6 minutes leading up to the crash, Perez was looking down. And when he finally focuses on the road, it's way too late. Now he's alert, and he knows he's in trouble. Perez isn't the only offender. These San Antonio City bus drivers are also driving while dealing with their phones. This woman texting at 65 miles an hour.
It's just like, pay attention to what you're doing. Pay attention when you have so many lives at stake.
Betty Jo Hummel says she's lucky to be alive. Others caught between a cell phone and a driver haven't been as fortunate. 10 days ago, a Houston motorist veered into a flooded ravine. He and 2 others were able to get out, but 5 of his children drowned in the back seat. Police say a cell phone was involved. And 25 people died on a California commuter train last September. Records show the driver sent and received text messages in the moments before the crash. Back in Texas, cameras recorded the danger, but it was passengers who reported it as they sat in the back, hoping they'd live to tell. For today, Janet Shamlian, NBC News, Dallas.
Here's another headline. Bus driver suspended for playing games while driving.
In less than a day after KITV broke the story of a city bus driver playing a video game while driving a bus, the driver is on unpaid leave and being investigated tonight.
President of the bus company apologized for the incident and said he is embarrassed by it less than a month after another bus driver was arrested for drunk driving while operating a city bus. KITV's Keoki Kerr has the update on the story we first reported last night. Keoki.
Well, these incidents worry bus riders, especially since more people are riding the bus because of high gas prices. Bus ridership went up 5% last month compared to a year ago. This cell phone video shows the bus driver playing a video game while driving in traffic. Danita Waltz took these pictures as she sat on the number 54 bus from Pearl City to Punchbowl late Tuesday afternoon, and she thought,
What the heck is going on here?
She said the driver also put his right foot on the dashboard at times, but the scariest part was that he kept playing his video game.
How about this for a headline? Book reading bus driver faces sacking.
A bus driver is facing dismissal after he was filmed apparently reading a book at the wheel. National Express West Midlands said the driver, who's not been named, was suspended after this footage of the incident was posted on the internet. The company was alerted to the alleged misconduct after a passenger filmed the driver in Birmingham on Monday. In a statement, a spokesperson for National Express West Midlands said immediate action was taken to suspend the driver, who now faces disciplinary action.
School board says bus driver fired for texting while driving.
A Pasco County school bus driver is out of a job tonight for texting while driving. All new at 11 now. Our Allison Morrow joins us with her side of the story. Allison, I hear she admits some of it, but not all of it, right?
Right, that's right, Wendy. She has been reprimanded a handful of times for using her cell phone while driving kids on her school bus, and she admits to past offenses, but says the complaints that got her fired are bogus. This isn't the first time Lori Conley's bent down eye level to talk to Asia and Savian. After all, she is their school bus driver.
And have fun. We did, didn't we? Yeah.
But this time it's different because she's here to say goodbye.
And I'll always remember you. I'll never forget you. I'm feeling very empty right now.
Conley's driven school bus number 07269 for 6 years. She's been cited for using her cell phone 5 times, sometimes calling, sometimes texting. Finally suspended last year. She was warned if she did it again, she could lose her job.
So what is distracted driving? Well, there are 3 main types of distraction. Visual, taking your eyes off the road. Manual, taking your hands off the wheel. And cognitive, taking your mind off of what you're doing. Distracted driving is any non-driving activity a person engages in that has the potential to distract him or her from the primary task of driving and increase the risk of crashing. And distracted activities include using a cell phone, eating and drinking, talking to passengers, grooming, reading, including maps, using a navigation system, watching a video and changing the radio station or CD or MP3 player. Research on distracted driving reveals some surprising facts. 20% of injury crashes last year involved reports of distracted driving. Drivers who use handheld devices are 4 times as likely to get into crashes serious enough to injure themselves. Of those killed in distracted driving related crashes, 995 involved reports of a cell phone as a distraction. That would be 18% of fatalities in distraction-related crashes. 5,474 people were killed in the United States roadways, and an estimated additional 448,000 were injured in motor vehicle crashes that were reported to have involved distracted driving. The age group with the greatest proportion of distracted drivers was the under 20 age group, which was 16% of all drivers younger than 20 involved in fatal crashes were reported to have been distracted while driving. Using a cell phone while driving, whether it's handheld or hands-free, delays a driver's reaction as much as having a blood alcohol concentration at the legal limit of 0.08%.